We're less than a week away now from President-elect Trump taking office. Joining us to discuss what's ahead for Washington policy in the Trump administration is Tobin Marcus, head of policy and politics for Wolf Research. What do you think? Before we get to that, what about some of the cabinet hearings? Hegseth looks like they circled the wagons. He may not. I don't know how many he loses, but he looks like he's going to be Secretary of Defense.
Yeah, I think Hegseth will get through. It's possible he loses some Republican votes from outside the panel, but, on the Armed Services Committee, he had what appeared to be quite uniform support. And Joni Ernst, who's been kind of the key vote for him, someone who was initially skeptical, has been very vocal on sexual assault in the military as an issue, had some concerns. She's turned around and made explicit yesterday that she'll be supporting him, so I expect he'll get confirmed.
It was pretty eventful, that hearing. It hasn't always been like this, has it? Tobin, is it different? It seems worse to me. Some of the, I don't know what you'd call it, grandstanding.
Yeah, I think the overall level of partisan acrimony has gotten more intense across issues, including confirmation hearings. He is a very non-traditional nominee. It is when he was chosen by President Trump last year, he was someone who immediately leaped off the page as someone who was going to be controversial, certainly who Democrats would tee off on, and who would elicit some concerns from Republicans. He's managed to allay that concerns with the help of pressure from within the Trump camp. But, it's not that surprising that this is someone who would get some scrutiny. It's not that long ago that we have gotten a lot of uniform bipartisan support for nominees, and I think we'll see some of that in this case also. Scott Bessent has his hearing tomorrow. I think he will be a lot less controversial. It's not every single person.
Who's not going to make it? RFK, I hear now his prospects are going up. RFK Jr. Is Tulsi Gabbard going to make it?
I think she's the most realistic person at this point who might go down. There have been some concerns about her specific policy stances on some surveillance issues, and she, I gather, has not been terribly impressive in meetings in terms of putting those to bed. I still would guess that she gets through, but she might go down. Kash Patel is the other one that's been controversial, but people haven't been as vocal in terms of raising concerns. But Hegseth, I think, is kind of a bellwether. The fact that he's been able to put the concerns within the Republican Senate caucus to bed is indicative. I think a lot of these people are going to get through. RFK certainly, I think, will. So
let's talk the big bill in taxes, and then we can talk some tariffs. But just like one of your quotes here is that a lot of conjecture swirling around, but in the end, Trump is ultimately the decider. And we found out the president is the decider because George Bush, W, told us. Do you remember that? He said, I'm the... You do? So you are confirming that the president of the United States he's the decider for all the strategery.
Right. Well, yeah, and I think there's a lot of strategery being reported out of the Trump camp on issues like tariffs, where I believe these reports in terms of what the staff level conversations look like. We've had the Washington Post reporting that they're looking at sectorally targeting the universal tariffs. We had Bloomberg reporting that they're looking at phasing them in gradually. I don't think any of that is a done deal. Again, Trump will ultimately make the decision. But we've gotten a lot of questions from investors about what the day one executive orders are going to look like. And I think the fact that there are still these different swirling ideas that apparently have not been presented yet to President-elect Trump suggests to me that they're not going to be ready to do some kind of big bang tariff action on day one. So we do think, probably ultimately big moves in terms of where tariffs end up. Certainly, if there's a need for an external revenue service, as he declared yesterday, that would indicate that we're looking at durable tariffs that are going to raise real revenue. But we think it takes longer to get there than some market participants have been expecting.
It's funny the way, and we've seen it many times, that reality sometimes the best laid plans of men. We have a CPI report due today. Tariffs, taxes, the reconciliation, whatever goes into that, it could all change. Just like the Fed. The Fed always, they got those great dot plots. Oh, yeah, we're really sure we're doing this. That could be totally pie in the sky or fictional. All of this could change if inflation, which we don't know, maybe it is coming down as expected. Maybe not, though.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a really interesting early part of the year. I think the pattern of the last few years very clearly has been hot seasonality in terms of economic data. Would not be remotely surprising if we saw a similar pattern early this year in terms of these prints. Obviously, right now we're looking at the December print, but we could be looking at a multi-month period where inflation looks like it's running pretty hot. Rates already have been, concerning to markets. no guarantee of relief there. So yeah, I mean, I think that the conservatives who are pushing for big spending cuts as part of this fiscal package that they're going to do will be empowered, to the extent that we see more signs of market concern about deficits with rates being high. And I have always thought that conservatives have a pretty good amount of leverage to push for fairly real spending cuts in this package. So I think that's going to mean a less stimulative bill and some risks to certain sectors. In terms of, potential IRA changes, potential Medicaid reforms. It's not going to be kind of pure positive sum, like happy news for everybody in this bill. I think there will be some real tough choices involved.
So Tobin, Trump's not obviously able to run for re-election. We've heard what he says about entitlements and Medicare and Social Security and everything else, but then you put Doja, or whatever, however you want to pronounce it, Doge in there. Is there any way that if it looks like, we're headed for 40 trillion and, maybe interest rates go up, maybe inflation is hotter than thought, is there any way that comes on the table or would that just be, he's been too definitive that would never happen?
Yeah, I mean, never say never, but certainly the idea of before 2026, Republicans on a party line basis moving big entitlement reforms outside of Medicaid is not going to happen. Then there's sort of the lame duck question, like between 26 and 28, when Trump's term limited, when you presumably have a Democratic House after the midterms, if we get the typical pattern of thermostatic reaction, could you get some kind of a bipartisan grand bargain then? Maybe. I personally would not peg Trump as somebody who wants to kind of have his final act be what'll be, very unpopular, I think, but necessary deal on entitlements and tax increases. But, we're going to need it sooner or later. The numbers are alarming.